The ranch stood far from the town, surrounded by open land that stretched in every direction. Tall grass moved with the wind, and the ground carried the marks of many seasons. Life on the ranch followed a steady rhythm. People woke early. Animals were fed. Work continued until the sun dipped low. Most days felt predictable, but one presence broke that calm. The wild horse. She stayed in a fenced area near the far edge of the ranch, away from the others. Her body was strong, though thin, and her dark coat caught the light when she moved. Her eyes were sharp and restless. No one knew her past. She had appeared suddenly near the broken fence after a long storm, standing alone as if she had walked straight out of the land itself. When the ranch workers first tried to help her, she ran. She kicked up dirt and dust, dodging every attempt to guide her. When they finally closed the gate behind her, she slammed against the wooden rails in fear. Her breathing turned fast and loud. Her muscles stayed tight, ready to fight or flee. From that moment, she made one thing clear. No one was welcome near her. The workers tried many ways to calm her. Soft voices, gentle steps, slow movements. Nothing worked. Each time someone came too close, she pulled away or struck the fence with her hooves. Her fear filled the air around her. After several days, the workers stopped trying. "She cannot be handled," one worker said. "She is too wild," said another. Some believed she should be moved somewhere far away. Others thought she should be left alone forever. No one argued much about it, because no one wanted to be the next person she charged. Tom listened to every word. He was the rancher who owned the land. He was not young, but his movements were steady and calm. He believed animals understood more than people gave them credit for. He had spent years working with horses, and he knew fear did not come without reason. Tom went to see the wild horse one evening when the sun painted the land in warm light. He stopped outside the fence and watched her walk back and forth. She noticed him quickly and turned to face him. Her ears pointed forward. Her body stayed tense. Tom did not move closer. He saw the marks along her side. Old scars, thin and pale. They told a story without words. He felt a quiet heaviness in his chest as he looked at her. "She has been hurt," he said softly to himself. From that day on, Tom made a decision. He did not bring ropes. He did not bring food. He did not bring tools. Instead, he brought time. Every morning, after the rest of the ranch had started its work, Tom walked to the fence near the wild horse. He stood a few steps away and leaned against the wood. He did not speak. He did not stare. He simply stayed. At first, the horse reacted as she always did. She paced. She snorted. She kept her distance. Her eyes followed every breath Tom took. But when nothing happened, she slowed. Minutes passed. Then more minutes. Tom stayed still. When the sun climbed higher, he turned and walked away. The next day, he returned at the same hour and did the same thing. The workers noticed. "He is wasting his time," one said. "She will never change," another replied. Tom did not argue. He believed trust could not be rushed. Days passed. Then weeks. The wild horse began to recognize his pattern. When Tom appeared, she no longer rushed the fence. She stood and watched. Sometimes she moved closer. Sometimes she stayed back. Tom accepted every response without reaction. One afternoon, a loud noise broke the quiet. A loose metal sheet near the barn clanged hard in the wind. The sudden sound sent the horse into panic. She jumped back and struck the fence. Her legs shook, and her breath came fast. Tom stepped closer without thinking. He stopped just short of the fence and slowly lowered himself to the ground. He sat with his back against the wood, his hands resting on his knees. He did not look at her. He looked at the ground in front of him. The horse froze. She had never seen this before. People usually stood tall. People usually reached for her. This man was sitting, making himself small. The wind settled. The noise stopped. Tom stayed seated until the horse stopped trembling. Then he stood up and walked away as if nothing had happened. That night, the horse did not pace as much. She stood near the spot where Tom had sat earlier. She lowered her head and smelled the ground. The scent was faint, but it was different from anything else around her. The next day, Tom returned. This time, he did not stand at all. He walked to the same place and sat down beside the fence. The horse noticed immediately. Her ears moved forward. She took a cautious step toward him. Then, another. She stopped often, waiting for fear to return. It did not. Tom stayed quiet. His breathing stayed slow. He looked out across the land as if she was not there. Minutes passed. The space between them grew smaller, not because Tom moved, but because she did. When she stood close enough to see his face clearly, she stopped again. Her muscles stayed ready. Tom shifted slightly to get comfortable. She flinched but did not run. Nothing followed. No grabbing hands. No pressure. No force. Only stillness. From that day, something began to change. The horse did not trust him yet, but she no longer felt trapped by his presence. She started to wait near the fence when the sun reached a certain place in the sky. She watched the path where Tom always appeared. Tom never reached for her. He never asked for more than the moment allowed. Each day, he sat beside her, sharing the quiet air and the open land. The workers stopped laughing at him. Some began to watch from a distance. They saw the horse stand calmer than before. They saw her lower her head when Tom arrived. Fear had not vanished, but it had softened. In that quiet space, without words or force, something fragile began to form. Trust had taken its first breath. Morning came softly to the ranch. Light spread across the land, touching the grass and warming the fences. Birds moved between posts, and the air carried the smell of hay. The day began like many others, but near the far fence, something felt different. The wild horse was already awake. She stood close to the wooden rails, her head lifted, her ears turning toward the path that led from the house. Her body was still tense, but not as tightly wound as before. She had learned the rhythm of one man. When the sun reached a certain height, he came. He always came. Tom walked slowly across the land, his boots leaving shallow marks in the soil. He carried nothing. His shoulders were relaxed. His face held no expectation. As he reached the fence, the horse shifted her weight and watched him closely. Tom stopped and sat down beside the fence, just as he had done for days now. The horse did not step away. This small detail did not go unnoticed. She stayed where she was, close enough to hear his breathing. Her sides rose and fell as she watched his hands. They stayed still, resting on his knees. His eyes looked outward, not at her, not at the fence. Minutes passed. The workers paused in their tasks, glancing toward the far edge of the ranch. They spoke quietly among themselves. "She is not pacing," one said. "She is calm," another replied. Tom did not hear them. His attention stayed on the present moment. He believed animals felt intention more than action. He believed calm could be shared. The horse shifted forward, just one step. The wood creaked softly beneath her weight. Tom did not react. She stopped and listened. Nothing happened. Her head lowered slightly, just enough to smell the air near him. The scent was familiar now. It did not carry fear or pressure. It carried patience. Tom adjusted his position slowly, careful not to surprise her. The movement caused her ears to flick back, but she did not pull away. Her muscles tightened for a moment, then eased. This was new. The wind passed through the grass, brushing against her legs. She stood still and let it move around her. Tom stayed seated for a long time that morning. When he finally stood and walked away, the horse did not rush back to the center of her pen. She remained near the fence, watching him leave. Later that day, rain clouds gathered low in the sky. The air turned heavy, and thunder rolled in the distance. Storms often made the horse uneasy. She remembered too much. When the first drop of rain fell, she began to move faster, circling her space. The sound of thunder echoed again, louder this time. She struck the ground with her hoof and lifted her head, eyes wide. Tom saw the clouds from the house and knew what was coming. He walked toward the fence, even as the rain began to fall harder. The workers shouted for him to wait, but he waved them off. He reached the pen as thunder cracked overhead. The horse panicked. She ran toward the fence, then turned sharply, unsure where to go. The rain soaked her coat, darkening it further. Her breath came fast. Tom stepped inside the gate slowly. This was the first time he had crossed that line. The workers froze where they stood. No one spoke. Tom did not approach her. He stayed near the gate and lowered himself to the ground, sitting the same way he always did. The rain soaked his clothes, but he did not move. The horse stopped running. She stood several steps away, trembling. Her eyes locked on him. Thunder rolled again, closer now. She flinched, then took a step toward Tom without seeming to realize it. Tom stayed still. The rain fell hard. Water pooled around his boots. His hair clung to his forehead. He kept his breathing slow and steady. The horse took another step. Then another. She stopped close enough to see his face clearly. Her breath brushed the air between them. Tom could feel her presence, powerful and uncertain. He did not reach out. The thunder faded into the distance. The rain softened. The horse lowered her head slightly, her ears turning forward. She stood beside him, not touching, but close enough to share warmth. Her shaking slowed. For the first time since arriving at the ranch, she chose stillness over fear. After the rain passed, Tom stood slowly and stepped back. He left the gate open and walked out. The horse did not follow him. She stood quietly, watching the space where he had been. That night, the ranch felt different. The horse slept near the fence instead of the far corner. Her body rested more fully against the ground. She dreamed, though the dreams were lighter than before. The next day, Tom returned as usual. He sat beside the fence. The horse approached without pacing. She stopped close to him, her head lowered, her breath calm. Tom lifted one hand slowly and rested it against the fence between them. He did not touch her. She leaned forward, her nose brushing the wood near his fingers. Her breath warmed his skin through the gaps. Tom stayed still. This moment mattered more than any rope or training ever could. The workers watched from afar, silent now. They understood they were witnessing something rare. Trust was not being taken. It was being offered. As the days passed, the horse grew more curious. She followed Tom's movements with softer eyes. She stood closer when he sat. She no longer startled at every sound. Fear still lived inside her, but it no longer ruled her. Tom never rushed. He knew that healing did not come from force. It came from choice. And each day, the wild horse made the same choice again. She stayed. The days after the rain brought a steady calm to the ranch. The land dried slowly, and the grass stood taller again. Morning light returned, gentle and clear. In the far pen, the wild horse waited near the fence before anyone else arrived. She no longer rushed from corner to corner. Her movements had become thoughtful, as if she was learning how to pause. Tom noticed this change the moment he reached the fence. He sat down as usual, placing himself where she could see him clearly. His posture stayed relaxed. His hands rested open on his knees. He did not carry food or tools. He carried only patience. The horse stepped closer on her own. This time, she did not stop far away. She stood within a short distance, her head lowered, her eyes softer than before. The wind moved her mane gently, and she did not react. Tom felt a quiet relief settle inside him, though he showed nothing on his face. Trust was growing, but it was still fragile. Tom knew better than to push forward. He stayed seated and let the moment exist without demand. The horse studied him, her ears shifting as she listened to his breathing and the sounds around them. A bird landed on the fence nearby. She glanced at it, then back at Tom. She did not move away. Later that day, one of the ranch workers asked Tom a question. "When will you start training her?" he said. Tom shook his head slowly. "She is training herself," he replied. The worker looked confused but said nothing more. The next morning, Tom brought a small change. He carried a bucket of water. He set it down near the fence before sitting. The horse stiffened when she saw the bucket. Her muscles tensed, ready to retreat. Tom stopped moving and sat down farther back than usual. He waited. Minutes passed. The horse took a cautious step toward the bucket, then stopped. She sniffed the air, checking for danger. Tom stayed still. He did not look at the bucket. He did not look at her. She stepped closer. Her nose hovered over the water. She pulled back once, then leaned in again. When she finally drank, her body relaxed slightly. Tom felt the shift, though he did not react. Choice mattered. That afternoon, Tom returned without the bucket. He sat as usual. The horse approached with more confidence than before. She stood close enough that Tom could hear the quiet sound of her breathing. Slowly, Tom lifted his hand and rested it flat against the fence. He kept it there, unmoving. The horse noticed immediately. She leaned forward and sniffed his fingers through the gaps in the wood. Her breath was warm. Her whiskers brushed his skin lightly. Tom stayed calm, even as his heart beat a little faster. She pulled back suddenly, startled by her own courage. Tom did not move. After a few moments, she stepped forward again. This time, she stayed longer. Her nose touched his fingers again. Tom felt the gentle pressure and let out a slow breath. This was the first contact. The workers watched quietly from a distance. No one spoke. No one dared to interrupt. When Tom finally stood and left, the horse followed him along the fence line for several steps. She stopped when he reached the end, watching as he disappeared toward the house. That night, the horse stood at the fence long after the ranch had gone quiet. The stars filled the sky, and the land felt peaceful. She lowered her head and rested one hoof, allowing herself to relax more deeply than before. Memories still lived inside her. She remembered hands that grabbed, voices that shouted, the feeling of being trapped. But now, those memories no longer filled every space in her mind. New ones were forming. Quiet moments. Stillness. A man who sat instead of standing over her. The next day brought an unexpected test. A truck arrived at the ranch carrying supplies. The engine noise was loud and unfamiliar. The horse lifted her head sharply and backed away from the fence. Her breathing quickened. The sound reminded her of things she did not want to remember. Tom was already near the pen. Instead of stepping back, he moved closer to the fence and sat down quickly. He made himself small and calm. The truck engine continued to rumble as it parked nearby. The horse paced once, then twice. She looked at Tom. He stayed seated. She slowed. The engine shut off. Silence returned. The horse stopped pacing and stood still. She took a step toward the fence, then another. Her breathing eased. She chose calm again. Tom felt pride, but he kept it quiet. He understood that progress was not a straight path. There would be steps forward and steps back. What mattered was trust during uncertainty. Over the next few days, Tom began to change his position slightly. Instead of sitting outside the fence, he opened the gate and sat just inside. He stayed near the entrance, giving her space. The first time he did this, the horse froze. She stared at the open gate, unsure what it meant. Tom sat down immediately and looked away from her, signaling no threat. He stayed there for a long time. She did not approach him that day. Tom accepted that. The next day, he did the same thing. He sat inside the pen near the gate. The horse watched him from a distance, her body tense but curious. On the third day, she took one step toward him. Then she stopped. Tom stayed still. On the 4th day, she took 2 steps. On the 5th day, she stood close enough that Tom could feel the warmth from her body. He did not touch her. The workers noticed how much quieter the pen had become. The wild horse no longer struck the fence. She no longer tried to escape. She spent more time standing still, listening, observing. Fear was loosening its grip. One evening, as the sun set and painted the land in soft colors, Tom sat inside the pen and rested his hand against the ground. The horse stepped closer and lowered her head. Her nose brushed his sleeve by accident. She froze. Tom did not move. After a long moment, she stayed where she was. That small brush of contact carried more meaning than any command ever could. The wild horse was learning that closeness did not always bring harm. And Tom was learning that patience could open even the most guarded heart. The ranch settled into a new rhythm as the days passed. Work continued as always, but near the far pen, a quiet story unfolded little by little. The wild horse no longer stood alone in constant fear. She watched. She waited. She learned. Tom kept his routine steady. Every morning, he walked to the pen at the same hour. He opened the gate and stepped inside, then sat near the entrance. He never walked toward the horse. He never asked her to move. He allowed her to decide every step. The horse began to expect him. When Tom arrived, her ears turned toward the sound of his boots. She lifted her head and faced him, no longer startled. Her body still held tension, but it did not control her anymore. She stayed near the center of the pen, watching calmly as he sat down. Sometimes she stayed where she was. Other times she stepped closer. Tom accepted both. One morning, something new happened. As Tom sat quietly, the horse took several slow steps forward. She stopped just a short distance away and lowered her head. Her eyes stayed on him, searching his movements for signs of danger. Tom stayed still. The wind moved across the land, lifting dust and grass. The horse shifted her weight and stepped closer again. This time, she stood beside him, not touching, but close enough that their presence felt shared. Tom felt her warmth and the steady rhythm of her breathing. His heart beat calmly. He did not reach for her. He did not turn his head. The horse stood there for a long moment. Then she turned and walked away. Tom did not feel disappointment. He felt respect. Trust was not measured by how long she stayed, but by the fact that she chose to come at all. That afternoon, one of the ranch workers approached Tom. "I have never seen anything like this," he said quietly. "She trusts you." Tom shook his head. "She trusts herself," he replied. The worker nodded slowly. As the days went on, Tom began to introduce small changes. He shifted his position slightly. Sometimes he sat closer to the center of the pen. Sometimes he leaned back against a post. Each time, he waited for the horse to adjust on her own. One day, Tom brought a soft brush. He placed it on the ground near him and sat down several steps away from it. The horse noticed immediately. Her body stiffened, and she backed away slightly. Tom stayed seated and did nothing. Minutes passed. The horse approached the brush cautiously. She sniffed it, then stepped back. Tom did not move. She sniffed it again and nudged it with her nose. When nothing happened, she relaxed a little. Tom remained patient. Later that week, the horse surprised everyone. As Tom sat near the center of the pen, she walked up to him and stopped close. Her head lowered slowly, and she stretched her neck forward. Her nose brushed his shoulder lightly. Tom froze. He did not move his hands. He did not turn his head. He stayed exactly as he was. The horse pulled back quickly, startled by her own action. She stepped away and stood still, watching him carefully. Tom stayed calm. After a long pause, she stepped forward again. This time, she lowered her head and rested it near his arm, not touching, but close enough to feel safe. This moment changed something deep inside her. For the first time, closeness did not feel like a trap. The ranch workers watched in silence. No one spoke. No one dared to break the moment. From that day on, the horse allowed Tom to stay closer. She followed him slowly around the pen, keeping a short distance but no longer afraid. When he stopped, she stopped. When he sat, she stood nearby. Tom began to speak softly, not to command, but to share space. His voice stayed low and steady. The horse listened, her ears turning toward him. The words did not matter. The tone did. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Tom reached out slowly and let his fingers rest against her neck. He barely touched her. The horse flinched for a moment, then froze. Tom did not move his hand. He did not apply pressure. He let his fingers rest lightly, ready to pull away if needed. Her breathing slowed. After several long moments, she did not step away. Tom gently lifted his hand and lowered it back to his side. That was enough. The next few days brought steady progress. Tom touched her neck briefly, then her shoulder. Each touch lasted only a few seconds. Each time, he stopped before she asked him to. The horse learned that she was in control. One morning, a loud noise echoed from the road beyond the ranch. The horse jumped and backed away suddenly. Her fear returned for a brief moment. Tom stopped moving and sat down immediately. She looked at him. He stayed calm. Her breathing slowed again. She stepped back toward him, choosing safety over panic. Trust held. That afternoon, Tom led her gently with his presence, walking slowly while she followed at a distance. No rope. No pressure. Just shared movement. The horse matched his pace. The workers stood watching, amazed by the quiet connection. They had seen many horses trained through strength and command. They had never seen one guided through patience alone. As evening came, Tom sat once more inside the pen. The horse stood beside him, her body relaxed. She lowered her head and rested it near his shoulder without touching. Tom smiled softly. The wild horse was no longer trapped by her past. She was learning that safety could exist without force. And Tom knew that the hardest part was almost over. The final days of the season arrived quietly. The air felt cooler in the mornings, and the land carried a calm that came only after long change. The ranch moved as it always had, but near the far pen, something rare had taken shape. The wild horse was no longer just watching life from a distance. She was part of it. Each morning, she waited near the gate before Tom arrived. Her posture was relaxed, her head lifted with calm awareness. When she heard his steps, she did not tense. She did not step back. She stood still and ready. Tom entered the pen slowly and closed the gate behind him. This no longer caused fear. The horse stayed where she was, her ears turning toward him. He walked a few steps inside and sat down on the ground. She walked to him. Not rushed. Not unsure. She stopped beside him and lowered her head. Her breath moved softly against his shoulder. Tom stayed still, honoring the moment she offered. This was no longer patience alone. This was trust. Over the next few days, Tom began walking slowly across the pen while she followed at her own pace. Sometimes she stayed close. Sometimes she kept space. Tom allowed both. He never pulled. He never chased. He simply walked and let her decide. One morning, Tom stopped near the center of the pen and turned slightly toward her. He lifted his hand slowly and held it open at her side. She paused. Her body stiffened for a brief moment as old memories stirred. Then she took one step forward. Her nose touched his palm gently. Tom felt the warmth of her breath and the soft brush of her whiskers. He stayed calm and steady. She did not pull away. The ranch workers gathered quietly nearby. They had learned not to speak during these moments. They watched with respect and disbelief. She chose him, one whispered. Tom slowly lowered his hand and rested it at his side. He did not push further. He understood that trust grew strongest when left untested. That afternoon, Tom brought a simple rope and placed it on the ground near the gate. He sat down and waited. The horse noticed the rope immediately. Her body tensed. Tom did nothing. Minutes passed. She stepped closer to the rope and sniffed it. She lifted her head and looked at Tom. He stayed still and calm. She nudged the rope once, then stepped away. Tom remained seated. Later, she returned to the rope and stood beside it. Her fear had not vanished, but it no longer ruled her choices. She turned back toward Tom and walked to him instead. That was enough. The next day, Tom gently lifted the rope and held it loosely in his hand. He did not move toward her. He sat and waited. She approached him without panic. He let the rope rest against the ground. This continued for several days until the rope no longer meant fear. It meant nothing at all. One morning, Tom looped the rope gently and held it open near her neck without touching. She stood still. Her breathing stayed slow. Tom paused. Then he lowered the rope and stepped back. He smiled softly. Training was not about control. It was about understanding. The true test came when the ranch gate was opened one quiet evening. The wide land beyond stretched open and free. The wind moved across the grass, carrying familiar freedom. The horse stood near the open gate. She looked out toward the hills where she had once run. Tom stood behind her, several steps away. He did not call her. He did not stop her. The choice was hers. She took one step toward the open land. Then she stopped. She turned her head and looked back at Tom. He stood still, calm, present. She walked back to him. The workers felt their breath catch. Freedom had been offered, and she had chosen connection. Tom knelt slowly and rested his hand against her neck. This time, she did not flinch. She leaned slightly into his touch. The wild horse was no longer alone. In the weeks that followed, she began to join the other horses in a separate field. She moved among them carefully but without fear. She learned their rhythms and found her place. Tom continued to spend time with her each day. Sometimes he sat. Sometimes he walked beside her. Sometimes he brushed her gently while she stood calm and steady. The scars on her body remained, but they no longer defined her. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the sky glowed softly, Tom sat near the fence once more. The horse walked to him and lowered herself to the ground beside him. She rested her head near his knee. Tom stayed still, his hand resting lightly on her neck. The land felt peaceful. The workers watched from a distance, knowing they had witnessed something special. Not a wild horse broken. Not a spirit controlled. But a heart healed through patience. The wild horse who once would not let anyone close had found safety by choice. And the rancher who sat beside her had learned that sometimes the strongest bond comes from doing nothing at all. The land grew quiet as night arrived. And in that quiet, trust stood strong and whole.